Hey, I'm Tommy. Today we're going to take a look at the Moza Aircross 2 and we're going to do some comparisons against the Moza Air 2. And if you were curious, I already did a comparison between the DJI Ronin S and the Moza Air 2. I highly recommend you check that video out because a lot of the things about these two gimbals are the same. But we're just going to be focusing on the differences for this video. So let's just jump right into it. Number one, the Moza Aircross 2 weighs about half as much as its bigger brother, the Moza Air 2. Now, if you've ever held a gimbal, you know that weight is really important, and after holding a gimbal for any period of time, your arms will thank you for getting a less heavy gimbal. And number two is USB charging. Now, if you'll recall, one of the couple reasons that I liked the Ronin S over the Air 2 was because it had USB charging. Now, the Moza Aircross 2 has introduced USB charging, and its battery can be taken out and then charged separately with a quick charger in an hour and a half, and you'll get 12 hours on a full charge with the Aircross 2. So props to Aircross 2 for implementing the USB charging. Number three, the Moza Air 2 has 360 degrees of motion on every axis, including tilt. And that's really important because, check it out, let's turn this off. You'll find that you can position the tilt axis on either side of the camera. So when you're doing forward movements or inverted movements, you can get the gimbal really far over the lens without having to hit a hard stop because, of course, you can just spin forever. And I know that when I've been using the Ronin S or the Air 2, they have hard stops. So after a while, your footage, you might lose a shot, and you just won't do that with the Aircross 2. And number four, I should also mention that we are going to talk a little bit about the iFocus M, the follow focus that they've implemented. Now you can see that I've got it set up here, and the Aircross 2 has two follow focus ports. So you can actually set up two focus motors on the Aircross 2, although you can only control one at a time with this wheel. But you can toggle between them pretty quickly. Now, I did set up the focus motor on my zoom ring, which is something that people do. But on the Fuji X-T3 in particular, with the 16 to 55 millimeter f2.8, this is actually has a pretty heavy throw. And no matter how tight I connect the gears together, if I had the gimbal pointed upwards and I was zooming out with the focus motor, then I would get slipping on the gears. Now, this isn't saying anything's wrong with the Moza Aircross 2 or the Focus M and how they've implemented their follow focus. I'm just trying to help you set expectations. If your lens has a really heavy focus throw, there's a chance that you're going to experience some slipping, and I wasn't able to get around that issue. Now, if you have a lens that's not as heavy as this lens, then maybe you'll be fine. And as for follow focus, I have the X-T3, and I've also played with the Z6 on it. And I mean, if you have any modern camera with great autofocus, like any Canon camera, any Sony camera, this X-T3 or the Z6 or any Z camera for that matter from Nikon, any modern system with great autofocus, a follow focus is less and less of a priority, and it might even just be easier to try and get the shot with autofocus instead of spending all the time to try and balance and set up your focus, follow focus, which can be a pain in the butt. Now, there's going to be purists that just straight disagree with me and say the only way you can be pro is if you are manually focusing. That's fine. And also, there's going to be cameras that have terrible autofocus, like my GH5, for instance, or any of Blackmagic's Pocket Cinema cameras. In that case, you are going to want to get the focus motor, the iFocus M. And thankfully, it's pretty easy to set up. You just plug it in, stick the little rubber ring around your focus motor, pair them up, and stick them on this follow focus quick release plate thing. It's pretty quick to set up, and it works just fine. I mean, although I don't see myself using it that often because I'm just going to be sticking with autofocus, it's still really handy. Pairing the app with the Aircross 2 is pretty easy as long as you've got Bluetooth turned on. There, so I can see my battery level on there pretty well. And something I really like about the Aircross 2 that they implemented was the remote control mode with Mimic. I'm just going to hit start over here. Boom. And so if you have somebody else trying to control the shot, you can just be focusing yourself on controlling the gimbal. So this can be a two-man operation, which is really handy because, I mean, controlling a gimbal and holding it steady to get smooth footage is a job in itself. Having a second person to control the shot is going to be really useful. So this can be a two-man team. Now, I mean, you could also just stick this gimbal up somewhere and, try and, follow people around if you wanted to, I guess. But that's not how I see myself using this. You can also do roll actions, which is kind of nice. Oh, and you can speed it up too, sensitivity. That's slow. Here's fast. Works pretty good. You can also use the app to set up object tracking. So you basically mount the phone on top of the gimbal, hit your face, and then the gimbal will just follow you, which is awesome. I'm really glad they implemented that for people that want to use this gimbal as as their cameraman, which is, it's kind of cool, but I don't think a lot of people are actually using it in their videos. I mean, this tripod shot took me a long time to set up. I wouldn't want the camera moving around while I'm sitting here talking to you. But for other things, maybe outdoorsy type stuff, I think that would be really useful. It also finally has axis locks for every axis. So check this out. Let's turn this off. We got 1, 2, and 3. So now it's easy to store, move around, put places, or balance the gimbal with all the other axes locked. Also, it has multiple different locking positions for each axis. This one has 1, 2. This one has 2 as well. This one has 4. There. So a lot of different locking positions for the Aircross 2 on every axis. I'm just so glad to have the axis locks because, I mean, especially on the Ronin S, they don't have any axis locks, and you constantly get that clanging sound when you carry it around. And the Air 2 only has 1 axis lock, the roll axis, and the other 2 are always willy-nilly. And of course it has this sexy LED ring around the focus wheel, which is awesome, but it's not necessarily a game changer. It does look really cool and maybe slightly more trendy or professional to people watching you get your work done. It's just a nice indicator that the gimbal is on and it looks cool. You always got to appreciate good design. The battery grip is slightly, just a tiny bit more rubbery feeling than the one on the Air 2. The Air 2 just feels totally plastic and smooth, but there's a tiny bit of a rubbery coating on the battery grip for the Aircross 2. And it's not significant, but it is different. And that little attention to detail makes it feels good in the hand type feeling a lot better. It's not quite as good as the Ronin S, but when you factor in that this thing weighs a third the weight of the Ronin S, this is a much more pleasant gimbal to hold than either the Air 2 or the Ronin S. And finally, so the Aircross 2's case is about 30% smaller, so it's a lot more transportable. So there we go. Let's get into the bad stuff. And my hair is gonna grow out now because I just got my hair cut and I already filmed this segment earlier in the day. There's also a few issues with the design of this gimbal that I think could be easily addressed, some with small incremental updates and some is going to be on the next iteration. Number 1, the screw on the quick release plate mount to the L bracket is too wide, so you can't position your camera any closer to the center of the L bracket. It makes balancing the roll axis really difficult and you're required to use this plate setup if you want to use the follow focus. On that note, number 2, I think it'd be great if the follow focus was able to attach to the Arca Swiss plate that they include with the Moza Aircross 2. But for now, if you want to use the follow focus, you still have to use the L bracket system. And number 3, fully rigged, there are an overly confusing amount of quick release plates. I also had to use an additional third-party quick release plate on top of that. On top of the follow focus quick release plate, my lens was too wide around and the gimbal doesn't come with any risers, and torquing down the camera and lens otherwise would snap the lens mount off of my camera or break my lens. And because of this, my initial setup took several hours of tinkering around and trying to actually figure out how to get it together even after reading the instructions. Number 4, the buttons on the Air 2 have been removed from the Aircross 2, these extra little buttons over here. It really handicaps the interface and makes the Moza app closer to a requirement than an optional download to access certain features. Though you can still save and load config profiles into the gimbal menus, you can still get away without the app if necessary. It's just I really would like to have those extra buttons. And number 5, and this is kind of reaching, the thumb scroll wheel would be a lot more pleasant and easy to quickly adjust and use if it were slightly more rubberized, but it's like a hard, smooth plastic. And now a suggestion for a more innovative gimbal design. It would be really awesome if a gimbal was developed that had sliding or removable weights, or even an internal automatically moving weight system embedded within each balancing axis, so you can more reliably or easily or even automatically reach balance without losing mobility on certain points like the roll axis. I think that's something we could probably plan on seeing in the next few years, because I mean, people are already attaching their own weights. It'd be great if it was just integrated with a gimbal. All right, let's jump into some test footage that I took using this gimbal. So there we go, the Aircross 2 is an awesome gimbal, and all things considered, I like it way more than the Air 2. The cons are pretty easy to get over when you're greeted with so many advantages. On top of that, it can pair with the SliPod for some really cool capabilities, and I've got a SliPod on the way to the studio for a review soon, so make sure you're subscribed if you want to see that video. And give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Lastly, a big thank you to Gudson for supplying the gimbal for this review. They sent it to me knowing I'd be really honest with my review and no promises were made, and I like to work with companies like that, especially when their products deliver so much value. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.